My husband's sudden kindness should have been the first red flag, but I only realized the truth after I dropped him at the terminal. My 8-year-old son leaned forward and whispered that Daddy said I was not coming home because I was going to break today. My hands went numb on the steering wheel. I whipped the car around just in time to see a stranger sliding a black package under my seat. The business trip was a lie. I was the target. My name is Elena Hartwell, and for the last 15 years, my life has been defined by the hum of server rooms and the silent, invisible flow of HVAC systems at Northgate Facility Solutions. I fix things that people take for granted until they break. But as I pulled my SUV away from the curb at St. Louis Lambert International Airport, the air conditioning vent rattling softly against the dashboard, I had no idea that the system failing today was my own marriage. Brent had been perfect this morning. Too perfect. He had insisted on the long goodbye, leaning through the window to kiss me, his hand lingering on my neck just a second too long. He smelled of expensive coffee and that crisp, citrus cologne he only wore for board meetings. He told me he would be back in 3 days. He lied. I was merging onto the highway ramp, checking my side mirror, when a small, trembling voice rose from the back seat. "Mom, we can't go home." I glanced at the rearview mirror. Miles, my 8-year-old son, was not looking at his tablet. He was gripping his seatbelt strap, his knuckles white. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked, keeping my voice level. In my line of work, panic is a liability. You diagnose the noise before you shut down the machine. "I heard Daddy on the phone in the garage," Miles whispered, his eyes wide and wet. "He told someone that you aren't coming back. He said today you are going to break." My hands went cold, but my grip on the steering wheel did not waver. Break. That was not a word you used for a schedule change. That was a term for a mechanical failure, or a mental one. I did not slam on the brakes. I did not scream. I shifted into the diagnostic mode I used when a client called about a critical security breach. I checked the digital clock 10:14 in the morning. I reached back without turning around. "Miles, give me your phone." "Now." He handed it to me. I slipped it into the Faraday bag I kept in the glove box for testing signal interference. If Brent was running a script, I had to cut the feed. Instead of taking the exit toward our suburban enclave in Kirkwood, I swung the wheel hard to the left, looping back toward the short-term parking structure. I knew this garage better than the valet's. I knew that the camera on level 3, section C, had a blind spot because of a concrete pillar that Northgate had been scheduled to repair for 2 months. I backed the car into the shadow of the pillar, killed the engine, and waited. "Stay down," I told Miles. "Play the silent game." I watched the entrance through the tint of my rear window. 4 minutes passed. Then, a silver sedan rolled in, moving slow and predatory. It stopped 2 lanes over. The door opened, and Tessa Marlowe stepped out. My stomach dropped. Tessa was supposed to be a friend. She was the security consultant who had sat in my living room 3 weeks ago, drinking my wine, laughing about school districts. Now, she moved with a cold precision that had nothing to do with friendship. She approached my car from the blind side, crouching low. I held my breath, my phone camera recording through the gap in the headrest. Tessa reached underneath my car, right below the driver's seat. She slid a black object wrapped in heavy industrial plastic onto the chassis magnetic. Judging by the metallic clink that followed, she didn't stand up immediately. She pulled out her own phone, leaned back, and snapped 3 photos of the package in place, ensuring the license plate was visible in the frame. A man's voice drifted from the open window of the silver sedan. "Hurry up! We are on a timeline!" Tessa stood up, brushing dust off her knees. "Done. Just like Brent wanted. The tracker and the stash are set." I kept the camera steady on her face until she turned away. I captured the license plate, the time, and the clear shot of her profile. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hand was rock still. My phone buzzed in my lap. A text from Brent. "Honey, I just got a weird feeling. Please, drive safe. You know how you get when you're stressed. Just stay calm for Miles. I love you. I read the words, and the bile rose in my throat. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. If I crashed, if I got pulled over with whatever was in that black package, if I screamed or cried, this text would be Exhibit A. It would paint him as the concerned husband and me as the unstable wife who finally snapped. I looked at Miles in the rearview mirror. He was curled into a ball, terrifyingly obedient. This was not a business trip. This was an eviction notice. And if I went home now, I was walking straight into a crime scene where I was the designated suspect. We aren't going home. Miles, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, hollow, but hard. I put the car in gear. I knew exactly where the cameras were, and I knew exactly how to disappear. They wanted me to break. Instead, I was going to dismantle their entire system, wire by wire. I drove west, deliberately putting miles of asphalt between my car and the airport. I did not speed. Speeding attracts attention, and right now, anonymity was my only armor. I pulled into a dilapidated gas station near the interstate on-ramp, parked in the blind spot of the overhang, and took a deep breath. It was time to secure the chain of evidence. I stepped out and crouched by the open driver's side door, pretending to check tire pressure. I raised my phone, recording a continuous video. First, I filmed the odometer reading and the dashboard clock, which read 10:42 in the morning. Then, I moved the camera down to the floor mat, sliding it underneath the seat without touching a thing. On screen, the black plastic-wrapped package Tessa had planted glared back at me like a tumor. I snapped 3 high-resolution stills from different angles, ensuring the timestamp was embedded in the metadata. If this went to court, they would not be able to claim I planted it myself later. Satisfied, I got back in and drove toward our neighborhood, but I did not go home. I parked 4 blocks away on a parallel street, shielded by a line of oak trees, from the glove box. I pulled out the compact survey binoculars I used for inspecting HVAC units on high-rise roofs. I trained the lenses on my own driveway. The trap was set, and the actors were in position. A dark sedan with a municipal government plate was parked at the curb. A man in a sharp suit stood by the mailbox, checking his watch. But it was the woman standing next to him that made my blood run cold. She wore a windbreaker with the Department of Children and Family Services logo. They were waiting. If I had driven home with that package in my car, looking frantic, the narrative would have written itself an unstable mother, possession of illicit substances, immediate emergency custody removal. I lowered the binoculars and connected my phone to the dash cam's internal memory. I rewound the footage to 20 minutes ago at the airport. On the small screen, I watched Brent's car. He had not gone into the terminal. He had pulled to the curb, waited for a man in a gray hoodie to hand him a thick envelope through the window, and then he had driven off toward the city. The business trip was a fiction. He was still here. My phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I answered, putting it on speaker but keeping the volume low. Elena. It was Tessa. Her voice was terrifyingly calm, soothing, like she was talking to a jumper on a ledge. Elena, honey, Brent is worried. He said you seemed frantic. Just come home. We are doing a safety check for Miles. It's just protocol. She was trying to record a reaction. She wanted me to scream, to curse, to sound crazy. I am fine. Tessa, I said, matching her tone with the flat affect of a pre-recorded message. I am handling some errands. I hung up before she could pivot. I knew exactly where to go. Brent was a man of comfort. He hated grime, hated industrial decay, and refused to drive anywhere that wasn't paved with fresh asphalt. I turned the car toward Riverton, a dying industrial town on the river's edge. Specifically, the old water treatment plant. I had overseen the decommissioning of their cooling system 6 years ago. I knew which gates were rusted open and which security cameras had been dead for a decade. We parked inside the cavernous loading bay of the main pump house. The air smelled of wet concrete and rust, a smell that grounded me. Miles, look at me, I said, turning to face my son. Rule number 1, stay exactly where I can see you. Rule number 2, do not touch anything metal. Rule number 3, keep your phone off. We are not hiding. Miles, we are avoiding a trap that has been set for us. Do you understand? He nodded, clutching his backpack. Like in your video games, the stealth missions. Exactly, I said. I set up my field laptop on a dusty workbench. I did not use the public cellular network. Instead, I tapped into a localized maintenance bridge I had installed years ago for remote diagnostics, a hardline backdoor that bypassed the commercial internet service providers. I logged into our smart home system. Brent thought he controlled the house because he had the app on his phone, but I was the one who had wired the sensors. I pulled up the user access logs. There it was. In the user hierarchy, right under Brent Owner, was a new profile added 4 days ago, Tessa M. But she was not listed as guest. The permission level was set to administrator. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. Giving someone a key was one thing. Giving them admin access meant they could delete logs, disable alarms, and view live feeds. It was a level of intimacy that surpassed a physical affair. It was a transfer of power. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Anger was useless right now. Data was the only currency that mattered. I began the extraction. I downloaded the entry logs for the past 6 months, the internal camera footage from the living room that Brent thought he had deleted, and the modification history of the security system. I created a folder structure labeled by date and time, organizing the files with the precision of a forensic auditor. Let them have their staged witnesses and their fake concern. I was building a case file, and in a court of law, tears can be faked, but timestamps are eternal. I huddled over the laptop in the dank, chemical-smelling darkness of the pump room, the screen's blue glow casting long, distorted shadows against the rusted pipes. My fingers flew across the keyboard, not as a wife looking for reassurance, but as a technician isolating a fault. I pulled up the internal camera history from the living room, the files Brent thought were secure because he had deleted them from the app interface, forgetting that the physical hard drive in the basement server room kept a redundant backup. The video on the screen was dated 4 days ago, a Tuesday morning when I was supposed to be on a roof in downtown St. Louis inspecting a cooling tower. Tessa did not break in. She used a key. She walked straight to my home office with the confidence of someone who paid the mortgage. Brent was waiting for her. They did not kiss. They did not embrace. Instead, they sat side by side at the desk, spreading out papers and pointing at a laptop screen like a project team finalizing a merger. I minimized the video and opened the banking logs. I had to dig deep into the metadata of the joint checking account to find what I was looking for. It was not one large, alarming withdrawal. It was a slow bleed. $300 to a vendor I did not recognize. $450 to a consulting firm with a P.O. box in Illinois. Over 18 months. The total sum was enough to drain the equity we had built for Miles's college fund. It was enough to finance a new life. Then I found the document that made the air leave my lungs. It was a PDF labeled Draft Sale Agreement. I scrolled to the bottom. There, on the seller's line, was my signature. It was not a shaky imitation. It was a perfect replica of the way I looped my E and crossed my H. They had practiced this. They had likely traced it from my tax returns until they could reproduce it with muscle memory. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the icy realization of how long I had been sleeping next to an enemy. I kept digging. I found a draft email in Brent's sent folder, saved but not yet transmitted. The recipient field was blank, but the subject line read, "Urgent concern regarding spouse. Welfare check request." I read the text, and my stomach twisted. She has been acting erratic, refusing sleep, paranoid about surveillance. I am worried she might hurt herself or our son during one of these episodes. The timestamp on the draft was from 3 days ago. He had written the script of my breakdown before I even knew I was part of the play. He wasn't reacting to my behavior today. He was engineering the context so that any reaction I had would fit his narrative. I clicked into a hidden folder nested within his work profile. It contained photos, not of a mistress, but of my medical records. The physical therapy notes from when I threw out my back on a job site 2 years ago. My prescription for sleep aids from the month my mother died. He was building a dossier. He was taking my grief and my occupational hazards and stitching them together to wear as a mask of instability. A notification flashed on the screen. System alert. Admin privileges modified. I checked the timestamp. It was happening now. Brent was logging in remotely, changing the access rights to the cameras one by one. He was systematically blinding me, locking me out of the digital eyes and ears of my own home. I sat back, the cold concrete seeping through my jeans. I finally saw the full architecture of the trap. It was designed to make every exit a confession of guilt. If I went home, I was the erratic wife endangering the child. If I stayed away, I was the kidnapper fleeing with the son. If I screamed, I was unstable. If I stayed silent, I was cold and uncooperative. Suddenly, a beam of white light swept across the high, broken windows of the plant, cutting through the dusty air above our heads. I slammed the laptop lid shut, plunging us into darkness. "Mom," Miles started, his voice trembling. "Shh," I whispered, grabbing his arm and pulling him behind a cluster of deactivated filtration tanks. "Do not make a sound." The crunch of tires on gravel echoed outside, followed by the heavy thud of a car door closing. They had found the location. I held Miles tight against my chest, my hand cupped over his ear to muffle the sound of my own racing heart. "Elena." The voice drifted through the broken ventilation slats. It was Tessa. She wasn't yelling. She sounded calm, reasonable, terrifyingly gentle. "Elena, come out. We just want to talk. Brent is so worried. Please, just let us see Miles." She was performing. She knew I was in here, and she knew there was likely a recording device running on her person or in the car. She was laying down the audio track for the custody hearing, playing the role of the concerned friend trying to talk down the woman who had snapped. I squeezed Miles's shoulder, signaling him to hold his breath. I was not going to give her a sound bite. I was not going to be the monster in their movie. I did not answer Tessa. Engaging with her meant validating her script, and I refused to play the role of the hysterical wife for her hidden microphone. I shoved the hard drive, the USB stick, and the laptop into my bag with practiced efficiency. I grabbed Miles by the hand and put a finger to my lips. I guided him not toward the main exit, but to a rusted panel behind the chemical tanks. To the average person, it looked like a welded-shut access point. To someone who used to service the ventilation units here, it was the entrance to the utility tunnel that ran beneath the foundation. I put my shoulder against the metal and shoved. It groaned, a low sound of metal on metal, but it opened. The air inside smelled of stale water and dead earth. "Mom," Miles whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the distant highway. "Mom, I have another recording. I recorded it in the garage before we left." My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to stop. I wanted to listen, but the beam of a flashlight sliced through the darkness of the room we were leaving, sweeping over the spot where we had been standing 10 seconds ago. I nodded to him, squeezing his hand to let him know I heard him, but I kept moving. We slipped into the tunnel, and I pulled the heavy door shut behind us, plunging us into total blackness. We navigated by feel, counting the support beams until we reached the rear egress. I pushed the bar, and we spilled out into the overgrown field behind the plant. The tall grass swallowed us instantly. I crouched low, pulling Miles down with me. We looked back at the looming silhouette of the factory. A flashlight beam danced erratically in the windows of the second floor. Tessa was still inside, searching for a woman she thought was cornered. We reached the car, which I had parked in a patch of dense brush a quarter of a mile down the service road. I did not start the engine immediately. "Play it," I said. Miles tapped his screen. The audio was slightly muffled, recorded from inside a pocket, but Brent's voice cut through the static with chilling clarity. "She will sign when she is scared enough. The psychiatric evaluation is already leaning our way. I just need one incident. Just one." The recording ended. I sat there in the silence, feeling a cold, sharp rage clarify my mind. This was not a marriage ending. This was a hostile takeover. I immediately plugged his phone into my laptop. I created 3 backups of the file, one to the external hard drive, one to the encrypted USB, and one sent to a secure email address I had created years ago for sensitive work documents. I logged the time, the location, and the device used to record it, treating it like a piece of evidence in a criminal investigation. Then I turned to Miles's backpack. Tessa had found us too quickly. We had not used our phones. The car's GPS was disabled. There was only one other variable. "Miles, give me your bag," I said. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No, baby. You did everything right, but we have a leak." I emptied the main compartment. Nothing. I checked the lining. I felt along the seams of the padded straps. Then I found it. Hidden inside the small zippered pocket meant for an ID card, buried under a pack of gum, was a small, circular device. It was a tracker, thin as a coin. I did not smash it. Destruction of property could be used against me. Instead, I placed it on the dashboard. I filmed it, narrating clearly. "Device found in the backpack of a minor child. Time is 11:15 in the morning. Location is the service road south of Riverton." I zoomed in on the serial number etched on the back. Then, I dropped the tracker into an empty foil potato chip bag from the floorboard, a makeshift Faraday cage to block the signal, and twisted it shut. We had bought some time. I typed the serial number into the manufacturer's registry on my laptop, using my technician login. The device details popped up. It wasn't registered to a personal account. It was registered to a corporate fleet management account. Owner Northgate Facility Solutions. Authorized user Brent Calder. I stared at the screen. He hadn't just bought a tracker off the internet. He had registered it as a business asset, likely writing it off as an equipment expense. Tracking his wife and son was not a crime of passion for him. It was a line item on a spreadsheet, and that paper trail was going to hang him. I dialed the number for Maren Sloan. She came recommended by a site manager I worked with 3 years ago who had survived a nasty custody battle with his pension intact. Maren did not offer condolences. She did not ask how I was feeling. She picked up on the second ring and listened to my 60-second summary without interrupting. "Elena, listen to me very carefully," Maren said, her voice sounding like gravel crunching under tires. "Right now, you are not a wife and you are not a mother. You are a defendant in a case that hasn't been filed yet. He is building a narrative that you are unstable and flighty. If you disappear with the boy, you prove him right." "So I go back?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel. "No." Maren snapped. "Going back is walking into a trap. You stay away. But you create a paper trail that says you are rational, safe, and cooperative. Send a text through a traceable platform. Tell him you and Miles are staying with a friend for a few days to decompress because you felt unsafe after seeing a stranger near your car. Do not accuse him. Just state the fact. It puts the ball in his court." I hung up and drove to Caleb Price's house. Caleb was the kind of neighbor who attended every zoning meeting and kept a meticulous lawn. But he was decent. He knew Miles. When he opened the door, I didn't give him the sob story. I gave him the security briefing. "Caleb, I need you to watch Miles for 3 hours. I said, there is a situation with Brent. It is not violent, but it is legal, and I need to make sure Miles is not in the crossfire." Caleb looked at Miles, then at me. He nodded once. "I will keep the blinds closed. Go, with Miles safe." I parked in the lot of a 24-hour diner and opened my laptop. Maren had given me homework, 1 page, she had said, timeline, evidence, source. I started typing. I stripped away the adjectives. I stripped away the hurt. Incident airport drop-off. Evidence video of Tessa M. Placing package. Source, personal iPhone. Incident tracker on child. Evidence, physical device serial number ending in 492. Source, Northgate Fleet Registry. It looked less like a diary and more like a system failure report. That was good. Courts liked systems. Next, I called the bank. I did not use the emergency line. I called the fraud department during standard business hours, keeping my voice level and professional. My name is Elena Hartwell. I told the representative, I am looking at a withdrawal of $4,500 dated the 3rd of this month. I see a signature on the authorization form that purports to be mine. I am disputing this transaction as a forgery, and I would like a case number for my records. The pause on the other end was heavy. Ma'am, are you saying your husband forged it? I am saying the signature is not mine. I replied, keeping the emotion out of it. Please note that I am flagging this account for suspicious activity as of 2 o'clock this afternoon. As I hung up, a notification popped up on my email. It was an automated alert from Miles's school portal. Update to student profile emergency contacts. I clicked the link. Under the section for authorized pickup, my name had been unchecked. Beside it was a note pending legal review, father only. He was locking the doors before he even owned the building. I called Marin back. He locked me out of the school system. Expected, Marin said. He is trying to provoke a scene at the school gates. Do not go there. Do not go to the house to get your clothes. If you walk through that front door, he will call the police for a domestic disturbance, and he will have that woman, Tessa, there as a witness to say you were screaming. So I just leave everything I asked. Make a list, Marin advised. We will request a police escort to retrieve your property later. Right now, you survive. I looked at my laptop screen. The remote access tool for the house cameras flickered, one by one. The feeds were going dark. Living room connection lost. Kitchen access denied. Brent was scrubbing the system. He was revoking my admin rights, bit by bit. I started downloading faster, pulling everything I could onto the external drive. I grabbed the motion sensor logs from the past 2 weeks. I grabbed the garage door history. I was not just saving data. I was saving my sanity. In that moment, staring at the graying out screens, I realized the full scope of what was happening. I wasn't just fighting for custody or assets. I was fighting for the right to exist in the eyes of the law. Brent wasn't just lying. He was writing a tragedy. And he had cast me as the villain who destroys herself in the 3rd act. I am not going to break, I whispered to the empty car. I am going to rewrite the ending. Marin Sloan wasted no time. While I was still parked in the shadows of the diner lot, she was already filing an emergency preservation letter with the St. Louis Airport Authority. Your cell phone video is good, Elena, but it is subjective. Marin told me over the phone, her voice cutting through the static. A good defense attorney will argue angles, lighting, or context. We need the raw security feed from the garage itself. It validates your footage and removes the accusation of manipulation. I agreed, and immediately forwarded my indexed digital evidence file to the forensic accountant Marin had recommended. I included the bank statements showing the slow siphon of funds and the forged sale agreement. This was no longer just about who got the house. If Brent had forged my signature on federal lending documents, this was wire fraud. While the files uploaded, I called Caleb again. I needed to know if my paranoia was retrospective or grounded in reality. Caleb, think back, I said, keeping my voice low. The woman you saw today. Was this the first time? No. Caleb replied. His hesitation gone. I didn't want to say anything before because, well, I thought she was a colleague, but I have seen that silver sedan in your driveway on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the last month, usually around 11 o'clock in the morning. She has a key. Elena. I saw her unlock the front door myself. I thanked him and hung up. Tessa had been living in my house while I was at work, rehearsing her role in my life. This gave us a pattern of behavior, a witness who could testify that this was premeditated. But Brent was not waiting for me to build my case. He was attacking my perimeter. I logged into my work email through the secure portal, expecting to just check my schedule. Instead, I found a notification from HR. My boss had been CC'd on an email from an anonymous, concerned party claiming I had been exhibiting signs of substance abuse and erratic behavior on job sites. My stomach turned over. He was trying to kill my income. Without my salary, I could not afford Marin, and I certainly could not afford a custody battle. Then I saw something that made my blood freeze. I checked the system access logs for my technician account. There was a login recorded yesterday at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had been asleep next to Miles at that time. He has my password. I whispered to the empty car. Someone had logged in as me and downloaded sensitive client schematics. They were framing me for corporate espionage or at least a severe policy violation. They were building a dossier to get me fired for cause. I called Marin back instantly. She listened. Then her tone shifted from defensive to predatory. "We need to draw him out," Marin said. "He thinks you are running scared. He thinks you are irrational. Give him what he wants." I understood. I typed a text message to Brent. I forced my fingers to type words that tasted like ash in my mouth. "Brent, please. I am so tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to make sure Miles is okay. I will sign whatever you want if we can just do this quietly. Can we meet?" I hit send. It was the perfect bait. It used his favorite words: tired, quiet, sign. He replied in less than 2 minutes. "Thank God you are being sensible. Elena, meet me at the mediation center on 4th Street at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I will bring the papers. We can fix this." He took the bait. I told Marin. "Good," she said. "We will meet him there. But you are going in wired." I spent the next hour preparing. I bought a small, high-quality digital recorder that looked like a USB drive legal in our state as long as one party consented. And I was that party. I printed out a folder of documents, but I made it look thin, disorganized. I wanted to look like a woman who had grabbed a few papers in a panic, not a technician who had downloaded the entire history of his betrayal. I was feeling almost confident, almost ready. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I did not know. No words, just an image. I opened it. It was a grainy, high-contrast photo taken from a distance. It showed my SUV parked in the diner lot where I sat right now. In the corner of the frame, you could just see the back of my head through the window. They had not just tracked the car to the woods. They had physically followed me here. The net wasn't just closing. It had already been thrown. I threw the car into reverse, my heart hammering against my ribs, realizing that the game had shifted from legal chess to physical survival. They were watching me right now. I sat at the long mahogany table in the mediation center, my hands folded on top of the thin, disorganized file I had prepared as a prop. The door opened at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. Brent walked in first, wearing his Navy power suit, the one he wore when he was closing a deal that required intimidation. Beside him was Dane Whitaker, a divorce attorney known for scorching the earth, and trailing them was Tessa, clutching a clipboard and wearing the sympathetic expression of a professional mourner. They sat down opposite me. Brent did not look at my eyes. He looked at the papers under my hands, assessing his victory. "Let us make this simple, Mrs. Calder," Dane began, sliding a thick document across the polished wood. "We are filing for emergency custody based on your current instability. The terms are non-negotiable. You will submit to a mandatory psychiatric evaluation by a doctor of our choosing. The house will be listed for sale within 7 days. You will be granted supervised visitation with Miles for 2 hours a week, pending the medical results." Every clause was a standard trap. They wanted to force me to sign away my rights under the guise of mental health. I kept my voice low and trembling slightly, just enough to sell the performance. "I want to follow protocol. I understand you have concerns." Brent smiled. It was a benevolent, condescending smile. He thought I was breaking. He thought I was begging for a settlement. We just want what is best for everyone. Elena, Brent said, his voice dripping with fake empathy. Just sign the temporary agreement, and we can get you the help you need. I will sign, I said, reaching into my bag. But first, I need to play one audio file to ensure we are all on the same page regarding the timeline. Brent nodded magnanimously. Go ahead. Closure is good. I placed the digital recorder on the center of the table and pressed play. The volume was turned up to the maximum. She will sign when she is scared enough. The psychiatric evaluation is already leaning our way. I just need one incident. Just one. Brent's voice filled the small room, clear and undeniable. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds, but it felt like an hour. The benevolent smile on Brent's face vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, confused horror. Tessa was the first to react. She leaned forward, her professional mask slipping. That could be edited. Digital manipulation is easy to do these days. It is probably out of context. I did not argue. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward Dane. This is the metadata report, I said, my voice dropping the tremble and becoming pure steel. It shows the creation date, the hash value of the original file, and the chain of custody. It has not been altered. It was recorded yesterday in our garage. Dane picked up the paper. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking at the technical data with the eyes of a lawyer who realizes he has been lied to. I did not stop. I placed the photograph of the tracker on the table, right on top of the custody agreement. This device was found sewn into the lining of my 8-year-old son's backpack, I stated flatly. Serial number ending in 492. Dane looked at the photo, then at Brent. Who purchased this device? Brent blinked, his composure fracturing. It is a fleet device. For the company trucks. I authorized the purchase. But I did not tell anyone to put it on the boy. She must have planted it herself to frame me. It is registered to your personal administrative account. Brent, I cut in. And the GPS logs show it was activated inside the house while I was at work. The air in the room shifted violently. Dane Whitaker stiffened. He looked from the photo to his client. I could see the calculation happening behind his glasses. Defending a difficult spouse was one thing. Being part of a criminal conspiracy involving stalking and planting evidence on a minor was a career-ending risk he had not signed up for. Dane did not know about the black package. He did not know about the tracker. He had been sold a story about a crazy wife, and now he was looking at a client who had committed felonies. "Where is my son?" Brent shouted, slamming his hand on the table, trying to regain control by pivoting to aggression. "You kidnapped him. That is a felony. I will have you arrested right now." "Miles is not missing," I said, pulling up the text message on my phone and turning the screen toward Dane. "He is currently at the home of Caleb Price, a registered neighborhood watch captain. Here is the temporary guardianship agreement I signed this morning, authorizing Caleb to care for him until this meeting concludes." "Miles is safe. He is just away from you." Brent stood up, his face flushing a deep, dangerous red. "You are twisting everything. You are the one who is sick." "Sit down, Brent," Dane said. His voice was not loud, but it was freezing cold. "Do not tell me to sit down," Brent yelled, pointing a finger at me. "She is lying. I said sit down," Dane snapped. He closed his folder, covering the custody agreement he had drafted. He looked at Brent with undisguised disgust. "We need a recess. I need to speak with my client in private. Immediately." "I am not done talking to her," Brent hissed, leaning over the table, his teeth bared. In that moment, the concerned husband vanished completely. The room saw the real Brent Calder, the man who needed to control, the man who would break a woman just to prove he could fix her. "I think we are done for today," I said, reaching out to stop the recording I had been making since I walked in. "I will let you explain to your lawyer why you bugged your own child." I did not give them time to recover from the audio recording. While the silence in the room was still heavy and suffocating, I opened the video file I had recorded in the airport parking garage. I turned the laptop screen toward Dane Whitaker. "This was taken yesterday at 10:17 in the morning," I said, my voice flat and clinical. On the screen, the footage played out with damning clarity. Tessa Marlowe crouched by the wheel of my car. She slid the black and plastic-wrapped package onto the chassis. She stood up, took photos. And then the voice from the silver sedan drifted through the speakers. "Done, just like Brent wanted." Brent stared at the screen, his face draining of color until it looked like gray putty. Then, the realization snapped something inside him. He lunged across the table. "Give me that phone," he screamed, his hand clawing for my device. I did not scream. I did not freeze. I stepped back 2 paces, keeping the table between us, holding the phone against my chest. I let him be the aggressor. I let him be the one with the clenched fists and the veins bulging in his neck. Tessa moved faster than him. She circled the table, her eyes wild, reaching for the laptop. "You cannot show that that is illegal surveillance I did not consent to before she could touch the computer." The mediation center's security officer, a large man who had been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. He caught Tessa's wrist in mid-air. "Ma'am, step back," the officer ordered, his voice booming in the small room. "Do not touch the other party." Tessa yanked her arm back, panting. Her mask of the professional safety expert had completely disintegrated, revealing the desperate accomplice underneath. Dane Whitaker stood up slowly. He looked at the frozen image of the black package on the screen, then at the tracker photo, and finally at his client. He closed his briefcase with a sharp, final click. "Mr. Calder," Dane said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I am terminating my representation effectively immediately. I was retained for a custody dispute, not to shield you from conspiracy and manufacturing evidence charges. Do not contact my office again." "You can't leave," Brent sputtered, turning on him. "I paid you a retainer of $10,000. "You paid for legal defense, not for participation in a felony," Dane replied. Walking toward the door, he had to step aside as the door opened. Maren Sloan walked in. She did not look at Brent. She walked straight to the table and dropped a 3-inch binder onto the wood. It landed with a heavy thud that sounded like a gavel. "This is the time-stamped log of Mrs. Calder's movements for the last 24 hours, Maren announced. "We have copies of the emails sent to the bank regarding the forgery, the police report filed this morning regarding the tracker found on the minor child, and the preservation letter sent to the airport authority." I pulled out my phone. I did not ask for permission. I dialed 911 on speaker. "Emergency services," the dispatcher answered. "My name is Elena Hartwell," I said clearly. "I am at the mediation center on 4th Street. I am reporting an incident involving the planting of illicit evidence on my vehicle, forgery of financial documents, and the unlawful stalking of a minor. The perpetrators are currently in the room with me, and the situation is volatile." Brent looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He tried to laugh, a dry, cracking sound. "Elena, come on, put the phone down. You are making a scene. I am making a report." "Brent," I said. 2 uniformed officers arrived 6 minutes later. They were followed by the building manager, who was holding a tablet. "Officers," the manager said, pointing at Tessa. "We just ran a check on the visitor logs. The plate number of the silver sedan this woman arrived in matches, a vehicle that has been flagged in our neighborhood watch system for prowling. We have it on camera here and in the residential sector." Brent tried to step in front of the officers, putting on his best CEO face. "Officers, please. My wife is having a mental health crisis. She is paranoid. These people are feeding her delusions. I am just trying to get her help." The older officer didn't even blink. "Sir, step back." He turned to me. "Ma'am, do you have the evidence you mentioned I handed him the flash drive Marin had prepared? Video of the planting of the package, photos of the GPS tracker found in my son's bag, and the audio of him admitting to the scheme." The officer looked at Brent, then at Tessa. Tessa was shaking now, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "I need to separate you," the officer said. He gestured for his partner to take Tessa into the hallway. Through the open door, we heard the partner speaking into his radio, running Tessa's ID. A moment later, he stuck his head back into the room. "Sarge," he said, "you might want to hear this. Ms. Marlowe has an active warrant in Illinois. Witness tampering and falsifying evidence in a civil suit. She skipped a hearing 2 weeks ago. The color did not just leave Brent's face, it seemed to leave his entire body." He slumped against the wall. The safety expert he had hired to frame me was a fugitive who specialized in exactly what I had just accused them of. I looked at Brent. He was no longer the master of the house. He was just a man who had built a cage for his wife and forgotten that he was standing inside it when he locked the door. "I think," Marin said, her voice cutting through the room like a razor, "that we are done with the mediation phase." By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the legal landscape had shifted violently beneath Brent's feet. Marin Sloan moved with the lethal efficiency of a heat-seeking missile. She filed an emergency ex parte motion and given the police report and the active warrant on Tessa. The judge did not hesitate. The temporary restraining order was granted before the courthouse closed. Brent was barred from approaching me, barred from entering the house, and, most crucially, barred from removing Miles from school or the care of his designated guardian. But a wounded animal bites hardest when it is cornered. At 5:30 in the evening, my phone rang. It was Dave, my regional manager at Northgate. "Elena, I have an anonymous email here sent to corporate compliance," Dave said, his voice tight. "It claims you have been diverting company inventory for private resale." They attached a manifest of missing smart thermostats and control boards. My stomach clenched. He was trying to sever my lifeline. If I lost my job, I lost my ability to fight him. "Dave, check the timestamp on that email," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Then cross-reference it with the warehouse entry logs. I was at the Riverton site all day yesterday. I have not been to the main inventory cage in 3 weeks. I pulled over and opened my laptop, tethering it to my phone. I accessed the company server. "Look at the login for the inventory system." I instructed him. "The user ID is mine, but the IP address is residential. It matches the IP address of my home network. I was not home." "Dave, my husband is currently under investigation for identity fraud. He is using my credentials to frame me." There was a long silence on the line. Then I heard the clicking of keys. "I see it," Dave said, his tone shifting from accusation to shock. "The IP is external. And the security camera at the warehouse shows no entry at those times. Elena, this is insane. It is not just insane. Dave, it is a crime," I replied. I kept digging. I ran a search on my HVAC license number through the state supplier database. My heart hammered against my ribs. There were 3 pending orders for high-end copper piping and commercial condenser units totaling $12,000, all placed in the last 48 hours. The delivery address was a storage unit I had never rented. He was not just trying to get me fired. He was setting me up for a grand larceny charge. I called Marin immediately. She patched in the forensic accountant. "We are no longer looking at a divorce case," the accountant said dryly. "This is a complex fraud investigation. We are freezing the joint accounts immediately to preserve the audit trail. If he tries to move a single cent, the bank will flag it as tampering with evidence." While the lawyers built the firewall, I went to see Caleb. He sat at his kitchen table, looking shaken but resolved. I signed the affidavit. Caleb told me. I told them about the times I heard him on the phone in the driveway. I remember one time specifically, about a week ago. He was laughing. He said, "Do not worry, she will sign. She always folds if you apply enough pressure." I thought he was talking about a business deal. Elena, I had no idea he was talking about you. That phrase, "she will sign," it was the echo of the recording Miles had made. It turned a random comment into a pattern of intent. I returned to my laptop. I had one more door to unlock. I contacted the customer support line for our home security system, bypassing the user app entirely. I provided the police report number and my proof of ownership. They restored my administrative access within 10 minutes. I logged in. The live feeds were dark, but the cloud backups were intact. I found a clip from 2 hours ago. It showed Brent standing in the hallway, frantically typing on the wall-mounted keypad. He was not arming the system. He was deleting the user history. He was trying to erase Tessa's digital footprints. I downloaded the clip. In a court of law, destroying evidence is often worse than the crime itself. It is called spoliation, and it is an admission of guilt that no lawyer can talk their way out of. Later that night, I sat with Miles in the guest room of the small extended-stay hotel we had checked into. I brushed the hair off his forehead. "Is Daddy mad at me?" Miles asked, his voice small. "No, sweetie," I said, looking him right in the eye. "Daddy made some bad choices, and the adults have to fix them. You did nothing wrong. You were brave. I did not burden him with the details. He did not need to know his father had tried to sell us out." At 11 o'clock at night, an email arrived from Brent's new lawyer, a corporate attorney. Likely the only one who would take his call now. The subject line read, "Settlement Proposal, Confidential." I opened it. The offer was generous. A lump sum of $200,000, full custody of Miles, and the house. But there was a catch. Clause 14 was a non-disclosure agreement. It required me to destroy all copies of the recordings, withdraw the police report, and never speak of the misunderstanding again. He was terrified. He was trying to buy his life back. I forwarded the email to Marin with a 2-word message. No deal. I was not going to sign a piece of paper that let him walk away with his reputation intact. I was not going to let him buy silence with money he had tried to steal from me. "We are going to the hearing on Friday," I whispered to the empty room. I was done hiding in blind spots. I was done avoiding the cameras. I was going to walk into that courtroom with every receipt, every log, and every second of footage, and I was going to force Brent Calder to answer for his script in the harsh, unforgiving light of the public record. The hearing was supposed to be Brent's victory lap. He walked into the courtroom wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car, radiating the confidence of a man who believed the world was built to serve him. He stopped at the plaintiff's table, leaned over toward me, and whispered with that familiar, patronizing smirk. "You are making this so hard on yourself. Elena, I told you. You just had to speak to my lawyer. I did not look at him. I looked at the judge." Marin Sloan stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not pace. She simply laid her hands on the stack of files we had spent 48 hours compiling. "Your Honor," Marin said, her voice carrying to the back of the room. "We did speak to his lawyer. We also spoke to the fraud division of the bank, the head of security at St. Louis International Airport, and the system administrator for the cloud server hosting the defendant's home cameras." The air in the courtroom seemed to vanish. Brent stiffened, his smirk faltering for the first time. We began with the airport footage. We played the security feed from the garage side by side with my cell phone video. It showed Tessa planting the package. It showed Brent's car never entering the terminal. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked over the bench at Brent. "Mr. Calder," she asked, "where is the boarding pass for this alleged business trip? Where is the hotel receipt I rescheduled," Brent stammered. It was a last-minute change, a change that involved waiting in a parking lot for a package exchange, the judge asked. We moved to the tracker. Marin presented the purchase order. It was irrefutable. The credit card used belonged to Northgate Facility Solutions, but the user profile was Brent's personal login. He could not blame a subordinate. He could not blame me. He bought a tracking device, Marin stated, and he placed it on an 8-year-old child. Then came the financial records. The forensic accountant's report on the forged signature was damning enough, but Marin added the sworn affidavit from Dane Whitaker, Brent's former attorney. The document stated clearly that Dane had withdrawn from counsel due to the discovery of manufactured evidence and criminal intent. When your own lawyer testifies against you on paper, the game is over. But the final blow came from Tessa, facing charges of stalking and witness tampering, and terrified of prison. She had turned on Brent to save herself. Marin projected a transcript of their text messages onto the screen. "Make sure you plant the package today. Adjust the living room camera angle so I can get a clear shot of her panic when you call. We need her to look unstable." The courtroom went silent. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not a bad marriage. It was a director giving stage notes for a tragedy he was orchestrating. The judge did not need to deliberate. She ruled from the bench. "The court finds that the plaintiff has engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment and fraud," the judge said, her voice sharp. "Ms. Hartwell is granted full temporary custody. Mr. Calder, you are granted supervised visitation only, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. All marital assets are frozen effective immediately. Your request for a psychiatric evaluation of the defendant is denied with prejudice." Brent stood there, blinking. The gavel sound echoed like a gunshot. As the bailiff moved to escort us out, Brent turned to me. The mask was gone. There was no CEO, no concerned husband, just a small, exposed man. "Elena," he said, his voice cracking. You really blew this out of proportion." I looked at him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, just the hollow realization that I had spent 15 years with a stranger. "I did exactly what you told me to do." "Brent," I said, "I spoke to a lawyer, and she was better than yours." I walked out of the courtroom and picked up Miles from the bench where Caleb was waiting. I did not cheer. I did not celebrate. We drove to a new apartment with a new set of keys that Brent would never touch. I kept the files, the logs, and the recordings in a fireproof safe not as memories, but as armor. Brent thought he could edit my reality, but in the end, he forgot the most important rule of engineering. You cannot build a stable life on a cracked foundation without the whole thing coming down on your head. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Mia Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please comment your location below so we can connect and share our thoughts together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story.